Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. Olivia Grace got an early start as a writer at the age of 15, and that was just a few years ago. Now she's published her book, The Kingdom of Fable, Book 1. And between your love of reading and experimenting on various platforms, you seem to be finding your way.
You know, I was kind of the type of kid that, adored reading. I literally, instead of going out and hanging out with friends, I would stay home and read. And I always loved writing. I would, create little stories for my little stuffed animals when I was like 10. I would tell my mom these crazy stories that I had come up with. And I was like, you know what, why don't you just, it was a thought, maybe I could really try writing. And, luckily the world now has so many free platforms and open platforms today. And that's how I kind of got my footing as a writer, and how I found people who were going to give good feedback and even help me become a better author as time went on. And I could start to see my writing grow from, being 16 to being 19. And people don't understand that, in 3 years, your writing really truly does change as you mature and grow older. And it's crazy to go back and see something I wrote when I was 16 and something I wrote now. But that's kind of how I got my footing as a writer, was writing on free platforms.
So you write on these platforms and then you get feedback?
Yeah, so it's a chapter by chapter kind of update system. And you can put your books on these platforms and people can comment on it and give you feedback, or they can comment on it and say they like the story. A lot of the times I got feedback, or I got people saying, oh my gosh, this story is great. I wish that I had a paperback version of this book. And they'll give me feedback like, this was great, but you really could work on this, and this going forward. And it kind of helps you kind of take a step back and read it from an outside point of view, because I'm one of those people. Every artist hates their creation. I don't hate my books. When I see my books, I'm like, oh, I could have done this and I could have done that. And what about this? And I could have done that. But I'm not one of those artists that hate their creations, thank God.
And you don't worry about anybody stealing your idea?
That was actually something that I did come across and that I did battle. And it was only when I started getting published that this all started happening. I got picked up by Fulton Books, and literally a month later, I got a message from, one of the readers that has been reading my books since I was 16. It was like, hey, I found your book on this app. And I was like, oh. So I would go and I found it on the e-reader app. And then I found it on 4 different apps where I had not given permission for them to place it on it. And the e-reader app was probably one of the hardest ones to get off, because they kept telling me, oh, we have gotten permission to post this book. I was like, no, you didn't. So I had to tell them, either you take it down or I'm going to get my lawyers involved. And they finally sent me a message like, we have deleted this book.
That's crazy.
It is. And I actually even had somebody on that free platform, on that free forum, steal my book.
Yeah. A lot of people, especially people who write sci-fi, tend to get on these websites where they're sharing ideas, sharing character development, and they find it really helpful in developing plots, developing dialogue. But it makes me wonder, doesn't it make it easier to steal somebody's stuff?
Here's the thing. In both of the apps that I use swear that they are up on copyright. I will tell you that I did kind of have difficulty with one of the apps, because I had it on app number 1, and that was the first app I posted on. This was early days of the book too, even before I thought, oh God, I'm going to get this published one day. And I actually had it on that app for a few months before I had put it on app number 2. Well, turns out somebody had taken it from app number 1 and posted it on app number 2. So when I went to their copyright team on app number 2 saying, hey, this is mine, like, it's in the process of getting published. They said, well, because they posted it a few months before you posted yours, it looks like you stole their work.
Oh.
I said, but here's the thing. I have the whole book. They only have up to a certain amount of chapters because I took the book off.
Well, is anybody making money?
So the apps were making money, which is why they took it off as quickly as they did, because I mentioned the word fraud and illegal and lawyers, and they're like, oh.
Huh. How many books have you published?
This is my first book I've ever published, like through a publishing house.
Okay, but you have other books out there?
Yes, I have a few other books that are finished. I don't really know if I ever plan on getting those books published. I really want to focus on a like fantasy genre. So I have 2 books on a reading app that you pay for called Gality, and I do get paid for those.
Oh.
And then I have this series that I'm working on that I've gotten published through Fulton that, has taken up my whole world. Because let me tell you, I've been doing nothing but writing since I got this, since I got picked up by them. And so I'm so grateful for everything that they've done for me. It's still crazy to me to be like, to walk up to somebody and be like, I'm a published author, right?
It feels good, right?
It's the best feeling, especially because, I had such a different plan for my life. And, writing is just one of those things that, they tell you never do, your hobby, or never do the thing that makes you happy because, as a job.
Well, sometimes you can't make any money at it.
For me, I told my mom, look, I got to figure something out because, I was in cosmetology school and I just wasn't feeling it. And it wasn't for me. It wasn't, something that fed my soul.
Right.
So I took a 3-month sabbatical from school, and I told my mom, I was like, I think I want to try and get published. And she said, well, Liv, I really want you to have something to fall back on if this doesn't work out. And I told her, I said, I don't need a second option. And she told me, yes, you do. And I said, no, Mom, I don't, because failure is not an option for me. And it's never been an option for me. And I reached out to publishers and didn't hear anything. And I was like, oh, Lord, I have a month and a half left before I have to figure this out. Finally, Fulton reached back. And so I got approved within like 3 days.
What is your book about?
So my book is about a young girl who has to go through rejection. And, I'm one of those people that think that everybody has to go through rejection at some point in their life. And she is faced with somebody who was made for her. Her soulmate rejects her, and she has to go through the rejection process. And it's more than just, a few words. It's more than just, we're no longer soulmates. I'll see you later. It's, a medicine, an elixir, a ceremony, and like this entire process like rips your soul away from your soulmates.
Whoa.
And it's a werewolf book. I don't know if you could tell if it was a werewolf book, but and this guy who is somebody that is supposed to help her through it, he is the only other person in this world who has ever survived a rejection ceremony, because these rejection ceremonies are so intense that madness, death are often what comes out of it. And he comes through to help her through this time where she has to say goodbye to what has been repeated to her entire life. Turn 18, meet your mate, move out, start living your life, have kids. It's just something that's very repetitive. So there's no worries about it. It's something that was guaranteed in her life, that she was going to have somebody there who loved her and supported her and was there for her through her entire life. Was not. And through all of this, there is somebody else who has his eyes on our girl here. And, a war is on the horizon, and, she's truly at like the center of it all. And it's just like, will she save the world or will she destroy it?
All right. And this is book 1. How many books do you have?
I am planning for 6. I'm working on 2 right now, and I finished 1. Yay. So I'm planning for 6. There might be either more or less. It just depends on like when I get towards the end, if I want to wrap it up there or if I want to choose a different, story to follow. It is an anthology series, so it does follow 2 different main characters and 2 different people every single book, but all of the books do connect in one way or another.
Okay, so now you got to get people to buy them.
Oh gosh. When it first came out, I was telling everybody like I could that I was friends with, I play video games. I was telling everybody that I play video games with, hey, my book is out and you can buy it. And, I've had so many amazing people in my life who have supported me and who have bought this book. And then I actually went to Barnes and Noble with my friend and I was telling everybody in the store, I was like, listen, do you like fantasy novels? And this girl was in the fantasy aisle. This poor girl. I walked up to her and I was like, hi. And she was like, hi. And I said, do you like fantasy? And knowing she was in the fantasy aisle, she was like, I do. And I was like, do you know that I just put a book out? And she was like, no, I didn't, but congratulations. I was like, thank you. I was like, you might really like it. I said, let me pull up the synopsis for you to read. And so I pulled up the synopsis for her. And she actually went up to the center of the desk and bought the book right there.
You are something else. So you're doing all right.
I'm doing okay. It is hard, trying to get it out there. I was told by many people, the hardest part's going to be building a readership. That's going to be your hardest part. And I was like, look, not only am I funny, but I'm determined. That there's no greater combination. I'm hoping to eventually get like maybe a couple small book signings.
Okay.
Definitely. I've got some stuff planned on social media with Fulton Books. I know that and Snow Tree Media. They've been great helping me out. They've made like a Facebook page, Instagram, and they're helping me make a Pinterest, and I've got like a book trailer. So people I work with have been more than willing to buy a book, and I keep telling them like, hey, you buy a paperback book, I'll sign it.
There you go.
And they're like, okay. And I'm like, yeah. So my best friend in this entire world, he got one of my 10 free copies, one of my 10 free signed copies, and he bought a copy for his sister.
Great. All right, Olivia. I'll tell you, I can feel your enthusiasm seeping through the phone.
I hope so. I really do. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. I really can't.
Well, hang in there and just don't give up.
I won't.
And I'll talk to you when the next one comes out.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. The Percy Jackson series, a popular book series for middle schoolers, is what inspired T.R. Palechek to start writing when she was just 10 years old. Now she's published her first book, Daughters of the Light, book 1 of the Aluminum trilogy. Tell me about this book series.
It's about this kid of the same name, Percy Jackson, and he finds out that the Greek gods are real and he's the child of one. And so it's kind of a story just like how he navigates his life from that point. Daughters of Light was actually, I've had this idea of at least like Ruth the character in my head for a very long time. It kind of just developed as I became a teenager, and then I became a young adult. And it really started kind of after I got into, like, I read, like I said, the Percy Jackson books and like Harry Potter, and I knew I was drawn to these like magical worlds that are like parallel to our normal world, and I wanted to write something like that. And I was raised in a religious household, so I kind of was always exposed to this story of like angels and demons, and like it was always just very fascinating to me because we didn't know a lot about them, and it grew from there a little bit.
Angels and demons, I mean, just those two words, don't they just bring about endless images in your mind? Angels
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me what the book's about.
So my main character is, her name is Ruth Langford, and when the story starts, she's waking up from a coma that she's been in for 5 years, and she doesn't remember what brought her into the coma or anything. And she wakes up and she is 27 years old, and she's married to this guy she doesn't remember, and she's just trying to piece together her life. And she also figures out that like the world of angels and demons is very real and it's existing around her, and there is some involvement that she has in it, and finds out that she is the daughter of an angel and the devil. And she kind of is just, her whole inner conflict is kind of trying to like balance the light and the darkness that she's like the powers that she's gotten from her parents, and just trying to figure out how to navigate that. And it gets kind of out of hand.
Is there magic? Like when you say powers, what kind of powers does she have?
Yeah, so it kind of starts whenever her emotions get out of hand and she gets like angry, she can like create earthquakes.
Oh.
And she lives in San Francisco, so it like kind of makes sense that she creates a lot of earthquakes because that's a very active spot. um,
A quakey kind of
yeah,
place.
exactly.
So she's responsible for the earthquakes that are happening.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes place in the 1930s. And she was born in the midst of like the great San Francisco earthquake. And basically in this story, she's the one that like set it off kind of.
Does she live forever? Does she live in present time?
Yeah, so she does have like they're called like celestials. So she does have celestial blood. So she is technically immortal. And she does eventually make it to like present day time.
What fun you must have had creating this.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of research, a lot of imagination. But yeah, it was definitely a blast. I did try to like make everything as like historically as possible, and yeah, like events like the Great San Francisco earthquake. And then I have like a little cameo of her meeting like John Steinbeck in the city, and having a conversation with him very briefly while he's in San Francisco trying to become a writer himself. So yeah, just fun little things like that are kind of nods to our history.
That's great. I mean, you sound like you'd be really interesting, at an open mic or a library where people are talking about their books and author talk.
True. Yeah. I have been trying to do a little bit on like social media and telling the people, like a lot of my coworkers and family and friends, stuff like that, so far about the book. I am definitely looking into trying to do some like author events at my local bookstores. So that is something I'd definitely be interested in.
And you have the time to dedicate to that?
Yeah, I think when it's your craft and the thing you want to do for your life, you make time for it.
So this is what you want to do for the rest of your life? You want to be a writer?
Yes, my dream job is just a full-time writer. I want to have like 20 books published, and yeah, that's my dream.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
With your dream. Are all 3 of your books done?
No, so I'm currently working on the second one. The second story is kind of proving a little bit more difficult than the first one to write. The first one was really easy peasy. I got it out in like 6 months. And the second one I've been working on for like a year and a half now. So I am almost done with that one, and then I'm going to start working on the third one.
Are you getting any feedback as you go along?
Yeah, so I do have a few people in my life, like very close friends that are avid readers, and just read pretty much the same genres that I write, that have been really helpful in providing me feedback, especially in places where I'm feeling stuck, or I don't know if this feels like for major things like the plot issues, like they help me with that. My husband has also been very helpful in like kind of picking apart like the characters and being like just helping me figure out like what makes most sense for them. And the people that I typically send my writing to in my personal life, they are writers themselves.
That's huge.
Yeah, they definitely help me get out of like ruts and stuff, and I could not have finished even the first story without their help. So
all right, big shout out to the writers in your life.
Yeah, seriously.
All right, well listen, good luck, and maybe I'll talk to you when you get that second one published.
Yeah, I would love to have another conversation with you.
All right, you have a great day.
Thank you so much. You too.
From our was thinking about it but never got around to it department, we have Thom Majka, head of business development for a software company, and a man with a very big heart, to talk about his book that he's dedicated to his little girl entitled Lindsay Smiles.
It's a story about the Smiles family. They are moving back to the hometown of Mr. and Mrs. Smiles and the town that Lindsay was born in. Lindsay is in fourth grade. She's 10 years old. Lindsay was born with Down syndrome. And the book is written in memory of my daughter, who was born with Down syndrome and who passed away when she was 8 months old. So that was the background of the book that I've been thinking about for years, and then finally put this together. The thought process of the book was, what would her life have been growing up? So I started with this premise of her being a 10-year-old, starting a new school in a new town. And of course, she's nervous, but her positive attitude and the support she gets from mom and dad, she's going to be okay. The last name Smiles throughout the book continually is the idea that her dad always reminds her, always keep smiling, and, as I put to the book here, always keep smiling. It makes you and all those around you feel better. So the book is about, that positive attitude, even though she was born with Down syndrome. When my daughter passed away 37 years ago, it's a lot different than today, but the premise back then there, that Down syndrome kids very limited what they could do. And, that's proven to be false, as, nowadays, it's very well known that Down syndrome children could do a lot, even though they're handicapped, born with Down syndrome. So to get that message out, we'll see how this book comes along, but I'd like to write another one where she's now in high school and progress her life and all the things she's been able to accomplish. And one of the things that I wanted to give back is all of the proceeds of this book go to the National Down Syndrome Society. So I'm donating all the proceeds. So it's just an enlightenment of Down syndrome children and kind of giving back.
It's interesting too. In over the last 37 years, how many more resources they have.
Yeah.
Some of the Down syndrome kids that I've had dealings with, they're able to live on their own.
Yeah, it's a lot different from when my daughter was. And my daughter's name was Lindsay. I used the name Smiles because the whole theme of the book is to have a positive attitude. Down syndrome children, and even in their adult years, they're always very upbeat.
Yeah.
There's always a smile on their face. And that was the background of the title of the book.
Have you stayed involved with Down syndrome organizations?
Back, when my daughter originally passed away over the years, not so much, but I'm going to be retiring from my job at the end of this year, and I'm looking to get back more into volunteerism, being more involved.
So rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in touch with, the National Down Syndrome Society, letting them know, all the proceeds will be coming their way. I've also currently doing some work in relations with the Northeast Ohio Down Syndrome Society, so it's a little bit closer to home. So keeping it all there. I've had a pretty good response since the book went out, maybe a couple months ago, just through my social media of Facebook, LinkedIn. A lot of people that I've known over the years kind of helping me get the book out into, the marketplace, telling the story.
That's great, Thom. You're doing a great thing. You really are.
I appreciate it.
It's coming from the heart.
Yeah, it is.
Well, you have a great day.
Okay.
After years of writing for his banking profession, Brad Heyen finally started following his passion for creative writing with his first book, 18 Years Seth, Growing Up in Foster Care in 2021. Now he's published his second book entitled Nellie, which hits very close to home.
This story is a biographical fiction story. And so Nellie, the title character, is actually based on my mom, who passed away in 2020. In her last few years, she was in the memory care area of a assisted living facility. And just she was not the same person the last few years that she was, and that frustration with the conflict she'd have with staff members, caregivers, and even other residents and even family members was frustrating to me that she was so misunderstood, and a lot of it was due to her memory issues and diseases. So
Yeah, that had to be really hard to watch.
yeah, it was. So the story unfolds with her struggling there in the center. She's having a conflict with the other main character, one of the caregivers named Audrey. And they're both not happy with the situation. Audrey's struggling with a very difficult person, and Nellie's struggling with what's going on in her mind and in her world, which is completely different than what she's ever had in her life. And so that conflict comes to a head when Nellie ends up passing away, and Audrey, the caregiver, goes to her funeral, and then at the funeral, she learns a little bit about the person that Nellie was, and it just kind of triggers an emotion with Audrey that, wow, I did not really understand her, and she was really an amazing person. And so that self-discovery starts helping her in her own life. She has lost a husband to suicide and is struggling with a rebellious teen. And that's how the story kind of unfolds. And so Nellie's life ends up helping her recover her life. I would characterize Nellie as cantankerous. If a fellow resident, one interaction is a resident hits her walker with her walker, and they have an interaction. Nellie has a conflict with Audrey, the caregiver, about getting up in the morning and then having some incontinence issues, and they just both despise the interaction. So,
Well, if they, had so much conflict in their relationship, what made her come to the funeral?
So I write in the director of the facility had the idea to have a good portion of the staff members go to the funeral as a learning exercise, and little did she know that the impact it would have on Audrey. It did have some impacts on some of the other caregivers, but especially Audrey. So the going to the funeral was a very important part of that discovery.
Was this difficult for you to write? I mean, emotionally?
Yes, it was. Yes and no. So my mom passed away of COVID while she was in the memory care area, and it was at the height of COVID, and so we were unable to give her a funeral. And so one part that I absolutely enjoyed was being able to write in a funeral scene for her with wonderful stories, that I was able to add, my brother, the grandkids, and friends. And so that was therapeutic for me. The rest of it, there are some moments that was tough, but there's enough fiction in it that the creative part made it enjoyable as well.
Is it difficult for you to talk about?
No, actually, I've enjoyed talking with that. One goal that I had for this book was for anybody that knew Nellie, my mom, that they would enjoy reading it. But to market this book, I also wanted it to be something that anyone, even if they didn't know my mom, would enjoy reading. And I think I accomplished that with this book. I think the majority of the people in this world have either had a parent or a grandparent who has changed as they've aged. And so if you've endured that in your life and felt that frustration of their lives just not being quite what they used to be, I think this is a story that will resonate with them.
What kind of person was she?
She was a first grade teacher for her career, and she was somebody that was involved in everything. She was a volunteer for my scouting, for my baseball teams, or sporting events, any school function. She was the PTA person, you name it. She was the neighborhood mom. She would do all those type of things. And so even as she got older and I got older, she would be the Sunday school teacher, just involved in absolutely everything she could get involved with. And so as she got into the assisted living facility and then loses her vehicle and her ability to socialize, that frustration really took a lot of her importance away from her, and that lack of involvement. And that was, I think, the big source of struggle for her. It was just more personality change where she was just a little bit more angry, forgetful, those type of things.
Wow, what a tribute to her.
Yeah, I think she'd be proud of this story for sure.
So have you had any book readings?
I did. I have had a couple of sessions with some book clubs where I've went and they've been able to ask me questions. And then I'm working on some book signings with a couple of local bookstores as well, and still working on the rest of my marketing plan. So I'm looking forward to it and getting some really good reviews by both people that knew my mom and otherwise. So it's really encouraging me to get this book out there.
Good for you.
So I think social media is a big part of that. And I need to learn all the aspects of it. And so I'm talking with one of my son-in-laws who has a marketing degree, and he's more of the in the social media realm. So I'm working with him on that. I know hashtagging certain things like Alzheimer's, dementia, aging, assisted living facilities can kind of bring this to a target market. And I've also given a few free copies of this book to some local assisted living facilities. I think it's one that if I was an executive of an assisted living facility, I would want my staff to read this story. I think it has a good lesson for the workers. So that's kind of the main aspects of it. I do think book clubs is one. The book club I talked to absolutely loved the story, and they were going to share it with some other people that they knew. So I think book clubs is another thing that I need to get behind. So, getting it out to a bigger audience as far as, it's a big country out there, and I need to do a little bit better of getting it to some other areas outside of where I live here in Wichita. So that's what I need to do.
Well, it sounds like you're on your way. It really does.
Yeah.
So best of luck to you. Keep writing. You going to keep writing?
Yeah, I do have a thought of a new book. I'm very busy with my banking career, but we just went through an acquisition with BMO Bank, and so I've been extremely busy there, but I do have my next book in mind, so that we will get to work on that here shortly.
All right. I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you so much.
All right. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.